the bringing the infection in, right? Like that's who's coming in and out every day, and that's where the greater risk is. And it's very likely that in the prisons, it's people who are doing the care work for their families who are having the most contact. So women who are going out and getting groceries and so forth. So because of the burden of care work and essential underpaid labor being dominated by women, we end up with mostly women getting infected.
One of the first calls for release in federal prisons was for pregnant women to be released. Has that happened federally?
No.
Very simple. That hasn't happened.
No, that has not happened. And you know, we heard about the case about Andrea Circlebear in the US who died shortly after giving birth to her baby, who died in Texas during imprisonment. We know this is not necessarily an extra risk in pregnancy. There actually isn't evidence that shows you a disproportionate risk when physiologically when you are pregnant. It's more social, emotional, and mental health risk for people, women mostly, who are doing the reproductive labor of caring for children, recovering, experiencing pregnancy, and how much more difficult that is in the context of COVID and all of the extra restrictions that we are experiencing due to COVID.
Do you have a message for Bill Blair today?
Let all the women out, buddy.
Thank you, Martha. Anything else you'd like to say while you're on the stream?
Thank you very much. And I just, these are very powerful images from the demo, and thank you to the folks on the ground who are doing that.
And tell us really briefly, I gave you a really quick intro, but just briefly tell us a bit about Women's Wellness Within and the work that's taking place.
So Women's Wellness Within, we've been working since 2014 here in Mi'kma'ki to advocate for reproductive justice in relation to the process, the social process of criminalization. And so we are a prison abolition organization. We provide support and advocacy in the context of reproductive health. So mostly in relation to pregnancy and birth and postpartum, but also in relation to abortion and contraception and really having real options and choices for women to live free reproductive lives.
Thank you, Martha. And Desmond, I'm going to throw back to you. We're still watching this procession take place.
Thank you so much.
I want to shout out the artwork on the poster. I believe that's by syrusmarcusware. That did I believe that is your art. So that's beautiful art. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Cyrus. And thank you to all of the people across the country. You know, we're having an opportunity today to speak with some people who are connected to prison justice and who are doing work communicating with people on the inside, who are doing work to advocate. And there isn't enough time to speak about or speak to all of the people across the country in places that are seen and unseen that are doing this work. And we really want to express our gratitude to everybody across the country who is not allowing prisoners to be forgotten in this moment and who is making sure that the advocacy and the work that's being done outside of this crisis, that it continues. It's really difficult. People are sacrificing tremendously. And also, you know, we see these demonstrations that are happening. They show that it is possible, even during a crisis like this, for people to engage safely and effectively in public resistance and in public advocacy. That can't stop during a time like this.
I think we're going to go to Sheena now. Sheena, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
We are juggling a lot of things. Thank you. So Sheena, Desmond, I believe you're going to do this interview. But welcome, yeah. Sheena. Thank you so much.
Welcome, Sheena, and please introduce yourself for our viewers.
Hi, thanks everyone for being here and all the people doing the actions right now. My name's Sheena. I'm in Tchitchage, Muniang, Montreal. I organize with a bunch of different collectives, and today specifically I'm here as part of Anti-Carceral Group and also as the group of people who are sort of behind the scenes of the noprison.ca website. Yeah, So that's who I am.
Sheena, we've been hearing in the news that Quebec has been hardest hit as a province by COVID-19, but there is less or very little talk about how that's specifically affecting people who are incarcerated in Quebec. So give us a rundown.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty scary in Quebec right now, as most people know. There's 40,000 cases of COVID in Quebec right now, with 3,200 deaths. In Montreal, there's 20,000 cases of COVID and 2,000 deaths. And 82% of the deaths in the province are in long-term care facilities. Here in Quebec, we call those CHSLDs. If you hear those terms, that's what that is. This is obviously reflective within the carceral institutions. There's 35 institutions, provincial and federal institutions in Quebec. The hardest hit right now with 168 cases is FTC Laval. It's a multi-level institution, and one person passed away in that institution, died a few weeks back. Are we going to cut to the... Okay.
We are seeing images here as you continue. I want you to continue talking, though. We're getting images here from one of the live demonstrations, but please continue.
Awesome images. Also Bordeaux, which is a provincial institution. There's 68 positive cases, and they're currently on hunger strike. I'd suggest everyone to go to noprisons.ca to read their manifesto that was released yesterday and a bit the day before. The conditions inside are really bad. We also heard about Joliette, a federal institution for women, 52 positive cases there as well. And as was aforementioned by Martha, guards are bringing in COVID. People aren't getting appropriate gear, especially in the provincial institutions. We're just hearing people still don't have PPE. There's very, very limited stuff. In the federal institutions, FTC, we're hearing that there's like limited staff, that they're looking for staff to come in, similar to the long-term care facilities. And there's been a lot of inaction and just silence on behalf of the public officials here, including Geneviève Gibault, our public security minister, and François Legault, our PM.
Sheena, I'm just going to break in for a minute here. We're watching the Ottawa demonstration now outside the Public Safety Canada office. And what you can see they're doing now is they have a coffin open and signs are being put into that coffin that represent the things that are being killed during this pandemic, including human rights, justice, any sense of human decency. So they've been throwing those signs into the coffin outside the public safety office. And we can see our comrades now that are leaving that and now headed to the next location. So they came from Rideau Hall. They were at the public safety office to make that point, and now they're headed towards the press gallery. So sorry to interrupt you, but I just
not at all.
To know what's
really
happening.
Appreciate, yeah, and we're seeing those images and people are getting that context from you, El. Thank you very much. Sheena, I also want to ask you before we let you go about the risk to people in facilities in Quebec who are on hunger strike right now, given that there is a pandemic that is the reason for these demonstrations. Can you please talk about the heightened risk that prisoners are willing to put themselves in to get public attention around their circumstance?
For sure. There's a lack of attention in the media and in general regarding folks who are in Bordeaux specifically right now. A lot of people are awaiting trial, they're on remand, and also in the federal institutions too, people can just be released. It's totally possible very quickly. This is not impossible. And for sure, like, people are putting themselves at risk by being on hunger strike and sort of like weakening their systems in a certain way. But that just proves that it's like that it's super important to sort of support them, be in solidarity, and amplify their demands any way we can.
We're going to leave it there for now, Sheena, but thank you so much for this today, and stay safe.
You too.
Thank you. We have so many screens going. So in Scarborough, we can see the coffin is still being carried and people are still making their way to Bill Blair's constituency office where they'll be engaging in action. And in Ottawa, people are just leaving the public safety office and are moving towards the next location at the press gallery. Cyrus, are you ready to go?
Sure thing.
All right, so welcome, Cyrus. Thank you so much. And of course, it's your art that has been shown for this action as well. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, making political art is sort of my jam, and there's some incredible artwork coming out of this crisis, and I'm really happy to be part of it.
So one of the things we wanted to ask you about is the situation in Toronto. There were a lot of infections in OCI, and then we saw that people were being transferred into places like Toronto South when they actually had to shut down institutions. So even though this action is about federal prisons and we're talking about the federal government, we know there's also situations in provincial prisons that are also places, for example, where immigration detention is. So I wondered what you've heard about that, or if you want to talk a bit about those situations as well. What's going on in Toronto?
Well, I mean, the situation in Toronto South is terrible because, as we know, they have a terrible healthcare setup there. I mean, most healthcare setups in prisons, for people who don't know, are lacking and piss poor and terrible. But in particular in the South, when they renovated and redid the building, they actually didn't have a working healthcare center for the first 18 months that the prison was open. So, their prison healthcare setup is really terrible. So they're just absolutely not prepared. So we've been hearing a lot about that in Toronto. We've been hearing a lot about the crisis of folks going in and out of these remand centers within Toronto, but also there's other places of psychiatric detention in Toronto that, again, aren't federal prisons, but are absolutely being affected, like psychiatric detention hospitals where there's outbreaks. There's a big outbreak in a psychiatric hospital in Hamilton. So we're just seeing these outbreaks pop up all over the city, and people are trying to figure out what to do about it.
Cyrus, Souheil is about to jump in from the Ottawa action,
Amazing.
but so we're going to cut away and come back to you. But very quickly, you've made... Oh, Souheil, we have you. Okay, Cyrus, we're going to cut away so that we can get Souheil in. Souheil, do we have you on the
Yeah, you have me on video.
Okay.
Thank you everyone for tuning in today. I'm a little bit out of breath because I am biking for liberation today. Yeah, so what's up?
Well, we've been seeing the images that you and others have been providing. Tell us what you've just been up to.
So we gathered this morning at a metro. We drove to Rideau Hall, where the Prime Minister gives his daily speeches, where he lies about how he has these policies in place to let people out of penitentiaries, but we're not seeing nobody coming out of prison and penitentiaries. We were there, we made a noise demonstration peacefully in order to pass the message of our incarcerated comrades who send us, who talk to us on a daily basis and who tell us about how things really are inside. And then we drove, because really today we're on a quest to find Bill Blair. We're trying to know where is Bill Blair, because he disappeared. He's not been seen by people who, need to talk to him. So where's Bill? We've been asking people around Ottawa, where are you, Bill? Where are you hiding? We want to talk to you. So where are you, Bill? Where is Bill? That's what we've been up to today.
Just to let people know, Souheil Benslimane is with the Criminalization and Punishment Education Project in Ottawa and has been doing this work there for quite some time. Souheil, is there any sense that you're getting about how it's been changing to be able to contact people inside of prison and jail? We know how hard that is at the best of times, but how might that have changed since COVID?
Mm-hmm. So since COVID, there has been a lot of changes. Notably, there's intermittent lockdowns. So I've been talking to friends inside who are on more than 23-hour lockdown daily. So when they come out to talk to me, they can only call me for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes maximum. Here in other penitentiaries, they limited the movement. In Cowansville, for example, they have access for range by range. So every range has access to the unit activities, which is like phone and laundry, basically. But, there are also like the ways in which the state punishes people for engaging in social distancing while in prison, hinders their ability to communicate with the outside. I'll give you an example. People inside, for example, at the Lindsay jail, which is a provincial institution, but correctional institutions tend to work similarly. I have a friend of mine who's in a cell with another gentleman, and they asking people to measure their temperature on a regular basis. So every day, as a measure, you have to check your temperature. If you refuse to check your temperature, they won't give you access. They won't give you access, and they won't give your cell partner access. So we see that we're punishing people for social distancing rules, but that also leads them to not being able to talk to their loved ones, to their lawyers, to just to communicate in general. I know people in penitentiaries right now, in CFF, in the Federal Training Center, who are not able to even call video chat with their loved ones. Other facilities and institutions, they offer video chat with loved ones, but we don't see, in the Federal Training Center, when there's an outbreak, they have a high and intense and extreme restriction on communications with the outside world, especially in the context of like lockdown, which is inhumane and it's a form of torture.
Souheil, we really appreciate this. We want to cut quickly. We may come back to you, but right now at Bill Blair's Scarborough office, there is the laying of the coffin that we saw being marched down the street earlier, as well as body bags. This is the scene in front of Bill Blair's. I think we're going to cut to that with the banner, "Prison is not a death sentence," and we're seeing several demonstrators standing now outside of Bill Blair's Scarborough constituency office with that banner and with those coffins and body bags being laid on the street and banners being displayed. I'll go ahead.
So Bill Blair, if people don't know, I hope you know by now, is our so-called public safety minister who does nothing to keep the public or anybody safe. Desmond can tell us a bit about Bill Blair's previous career for people who aren't aware, involved in what people have called one of the major violations of civil rights in Canada in the G20 protests. Bill Blair obviously supported carding the entire time he was Toronto police chief and resisted any efforts to not racially profile, and then of course is now the Minister of Public Safety in the Liberal cabinet, who is, among other things, responsible for deportations and also the state in the prisons. So you can see today people are bringing straight to his office. We see signs are now being placed on this constituency office. Over 6 weeks ago, Bill Blair said they were going to consider taking action on federal prisons. Since that time, I believe only one person has been released, and that was to avoid a hearing. So there was a court hearing. This was an elderly person with cancer, a nonviolent crime. So a test case that would have made it possible for other people to get out. So that person was released to basically prevent a hearing. But other than that, we have not seen the mass releases that have been recommended by every single legal expert, every single medical expert, the United Nations. So we see today people are finally, well, not finally, but people are letting Bill Blair know what we think of him. So Desmond, I don't know if you want to pick up on that.
Well, you said most of what I would say, Elle, but I think it's important to add that Blair is just among one of many politicians in this country who are hiding behind health officials. They're simultaneously really hiding behind health officials while standing in front of them. When you turn on your TV every day and you see COVID updates, most of what you're seeing is politicians communicating. But those politicians are telling you the things that they want you to think about this crisis and selecting which information from healthcare professionals they are sharing. No healthcare professional would say that a place where physical distancing is impossible, like a jail, like an immigration detention center. A healthcare professional wouldn't say that that was a safe place for people to remain. But the politicians are coming out in front of them because they want to selectively put out which messages they want us to hear. Bill Blair has pump-faked many times and said he was going to release many prisoners. We haven't seen that action. There's been excellent journalism by people dogging his office for statistics, which they are reluctant to provide. So this pressure that we're seeing with this banner now fully erected, and we see the coffin there and the body bags, this is what we have to continue doing in order to get the health information and the health honesty about the situation rather than political spin.
And what we have in fact seen happen in the prisons, so for weeks they were denied masks and prisoners were begging, can we get masks, can we make masks, can we ask them to be donated? They were not provided with masks. And then when they finally got masks, they were immediately told that if they were caught without their masks, they would be given charges. And so in Spring Hill, for example, which is a prison out in my province in Nova Scotia, 40 people in one day received charges for either not distancing, which means leaving their color. They divided them up by colors. If you put like 1 foot off your color, you get a charge. If you're not wearing a mask, you get a charge. So what they've ended up doing is criminalizing people for being in institutions where they cannot socially distance, while actually refusing to take any action on releasing people, which is the thing that actually protects health. We also are seeing signs here, not only obviously protesting Blair, but also making calls for abolitionist goals. So we see things like build communities, not prisons, release saves lives, invest in reentry. Cyrus, are you still able to talk?
Yes, and
Yeah,
I
right.
want
Yeah,
to
so
talk
this
about
is a
abolition.
perfect throw to you. So could you tell us some of the abolitionist thinking that you've been engaged in?
Yeah, I mean, this is an amazing time period in our lives because we're actually seeing that everything that the abolitionists, I've been an abolitionist since 1995, everything that the abolitionists have been saying is actually true. You could just open the doors and let people out, and it is actually as simple as that. Of course, providing supports in the community and everything like that. So this is a moment when abolition is a real possibility in our lifetime. You know, building the kinds of community supports, mutual aid, collective care that we want to see in our communities to make sure that people have what they need to survive. Is part of the living abolition every day. And then doing things like this to try to get people aware of how violent the prison system is, all of the different carceral spaces. Basically, this is a moment to say, stop putting people in cages. We know that COVID-19 has amplified that call because of people being put in cages, COVID is spreading like wildfire, but period, we shouldn't be putting people in cages. It's just a terrible, terrible strategy and idea. And it's actually a very short-term solution in terms of all of human history. Prisons are a relatively new phenomenon in human history. They were created and they can be dismantled. And we're at the process right now where we're seeing rapid decarceration happening across Turtle Island and all over the world because of COVID-19. And we could actually say together right now, let's just shut this system down and build something better. Something
Cyrus,
that actually reduces, the reliance on the prison industrial complex to resolve our harm and our conflict.
Cyrus, this term mutual aid is one we're hearing so much, I think, now in the context of COVID-19, but it's not something that everybody is familiar with. Can you help people who might be hearing more of this term mutual aid for the first time, where it comes from and what it means?
Yeah, it grows out of disability justice organizing, and it comes from Black and Brown disabled communities who are saying, actually, we have all the resources we need to be able to support each other, to be able to make sure that everybody has what they need to thrive. And so mutual aid is a way of supporting and caring for your neighbor, your community member, your friend, your sister, your uncle, sharing what you have, sharing resources, recognizing that this myth of independence that we've all been told that the best thing in the world is to be independent is a myth. Interdependence is where it's at. We are related to each other. We are connected to each other. We can support each other. We are responsible to each other to make sure that we all make it and we all survive. So mutual aid is this radical idea that we're all connected, which is actually a really simple idea.
And we are still watching the protest outside of Blair's office. Meenakshi, are you available to come in?
You read my mind.
Yep.
So could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Meenakshi, and I organize with the Vancouver Prison Justice Day Committee. And we've been organizing noise demos at federal, provincial prisons and immigration detention centers since COVID started and was declared a public health emergency in BC.
It's early for you, huh?
I'm awake for this.
Yeah, really. The death in Mission was obviously in the area where you're organizing in. Could you tell us a bit about what's been happening in Mission and other institutions out in your way?
For sure. And I also want to note, I'm joining from unceded Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories. In BC, we're actually in the midst of two public health crises. So COVID-19 was preceded by the tainted drug supply, which has led to thousands of overdose deaths. And I also want to note that it took COVID-19 to get even a semblance of safe supply out here. But in addition to that, we've seen the really stigmatizing responses to COVID and who is declared expendable during a public health emergency. So there's been a massive outbreak at Mission, where nearly half of the incarcerated community has tested positive for COVID. Let me know if we need to cut out, and I'm happy to pause because I know that folks are
please keep going.
Yeah,
please keep going.
So yeah, we've responded to the conditions at Mission where, as a local epidemiologist, John Farley notes, he saw the outbreak coming. He saw the lack of PPE, and he was really concerned about the impact, because basically in a federal prison or any kind of carceral setting, you have no ability to self-isolate, socially distance. One, because it can put you on the institution's radar for not behaving in the way that they want you to. And two, because
We
it
are
actually—
going to cut for a
yeah,
second.
go ahead.
Sorry. So what we're watching in Ottawa now, we are at the press gallery, and you can see people are throwing signs into the coffin. So we saw justice, community safety, freedom being thrown in. So all the things that are, this is representing the social death that is taking place. So you can see people one by one in a very physically distanced manner are going up to the coffin and showing us all the things that are being lost during this pandemic. So of course, prisoners' lives, but beyond that, the long-term effects of what it means to live in a place that does not value some lives at all and is willing to let people die or suffer in a pandemic. So that's what these signs represent. Sorry, Meenakshi.
Yeah, no problem. So, you know, we've seen a really failed response of CSC, the total absence of Bill Blair. It's a moment for also a diversity of tactics, right? Where a group is going out, making noise, making connections in a very visceral way. We also see families and prisoners filing class action lawsuits against CSC to call attention again to the utterly like negligent conditions that they've been forced to live in. And I also want to just note, like, I love this funeral procession. I think it's, you know, horrible that we have to get to this point where 2 people have died, 2 reported deaths. Who knows what those deaths of natural conditions meant. But this is like a really important strategy. People have tried to write to Bill Blair. They've tried to write to Ann Kelly. They've tried to demand release in all these other ways. And now we have to go to their offices. We have to find them because Bill Blair is missing in action during an incredible crisis. I've seen this happen here where local drug users stormed City Hall almost 20 years ago. Again, carrying a coffin to call attention to the council's failure to provide for drug users. And I point these things out because COVID-19 is one crisis. For people who've experienced incarceration, who are currently incarcerated, it's totally braided with long-standing crises of colonization, of anti-Black racism, of transmisogyny, of the drug war, of psychiatric care. So I think that in this moment, we as abolitionists also have the opportunity to bring all of those experiences to our organizing and look at how prison culture actually informs the lives of so many people, especially people who are racialized, who are Indigenous, who live in poverty. Because we're not saying just open the doors. We're saying open the doors so people can live. And that means that you don't overdose within 2 days of getting out. It means that you go and live somewhere where you're able to safely self-isolate, where you have your needs met.
Meenakshi, I just actually wanted to pick up on that because we know that at least 33 people have now been released from BC prisons. And as Cyrus mentioned before, this is the kind of thing that governments told us were impossible. And we now see that happening. But what kinds of supports do people who have been incarcerated, who are now being released, what kind of supports do they need?
I think you're asking like a really important question, Desmond, because what could happen, right, is we create hotel rooms that effectively amount to high security prisons. And that's not the type of release that's going to benefit people. We need folks to get released into community right now and to quarantine safely because, you know, we are in a public health crisis. But we also need to make sure that they do have like their safe supply needs met so that they're able to self-medicate. We need to figure out how to maintain social connection. Right now in prison, there's like a 2-week waiting list for a video call with a loved one, where the rest of us have kind of shifted to Zoom very easily. So we need to figure out ways to ensure people have access to digital means, phones, computers, all of those things, food security, ample income, like basic income, all of these things that we're kind of calling for in the community to support folks who are experiencing homelessness or sheltering in public space. There's so many parallels between the supports for people exiting prisons. In fact, often they are the same people.
Very much so. Thank you so much, Meenakshi. And we might come back to you. So stand by. For those who are watching, for those who may have just been joining in recently, this incredible coordinated set of demonstrations that you're seeing across the country today is being brought to you by the Abolition Coalition. And if you want to find out more information about that, we encourage you to go to noprisons.ca. There's an incredible amount of coordination and work going into bringing you the images and the voices that you're seeing today. Noprisons.ca is the website, the coalition, the Abolition Coalition, doing this work to bring us news from across Canada. Go ahead, Al.
Also participating in these actions, the Scarborough action is the Toronto Prisoners' Rights Project, as well as in Ottawa, the CPEP project, Criminalization, Punishment, Education Project. I think I always know the, I'm sorry, I know the initials. So we have a number of organizations that are participating today in the actions on the ground. And of course, people have made the coffins, the body bags that we're seeing, the signs. I believe we've lost the feed from Ottawa, it looks like.
I was just going to say, I was just checking back to see, and it looks like, yes, we have lost, but we did see several demonstrators at the last images that we had standing, holding signs, wearing their masks in front of the Public Safety Minister Bill Blair's constituency office in Scarborough, Ontario. And that was preceded by a procession along near Rideau Hall in Ottawa. And so we're getting these different images in, and yeah, we seem to have lost them now.
We are going to go back to Sheena. So Sheena has been involved in a hunger strike in Bordeaux. So earlier in this pandemic, we know in Laval, people in immigration detention were in a hunger strike protesting the conditions, particularly around people who are being detained for no other reason than moving their body from one place to another. So the Laval hunger strikers were taking place in March. And there's also another hunger strike taking place in Bordeaux. So Sheena's going to tell us and bring us some of those messages.
Great, thank you. The strike in Bordeaux began on the 5th. I'm going to read a text that was originally drafted in French. This is the English translation, and it's a manifesto from the Bordeaux prisoners. The first one is, we demand the release of more prisoners because what was announced last week affects only a tiny fraction of the detainees. In Bordeaux, very few prisoners meet the categories specified by the decree. We should not be playing with people's lives. COVID-19 is a fatal disease. We are not reassured by the measures taken to date. We demand that each day spent in Bordeaux count for 3 days of a prisoner's sentence, since the conditions in the prisons are radically diminished and unacceptable. There is no more visits, no activities, no TV, nothing to do all day. We demand that prisoners with 1 year or less remaining on their sentence receive early release. We demand prisoners receive personal protective equipment. At the moment, prisoners have access to gloves, but they are gloves for serving food. This is not adequate. Prisoners do not have access to masks, and we demand access to masks. Prisoners in some sectors have been granted Xboxes, while others have not. We demand access to more activities. We demand the creation of a prisoners' committee and the recognition of this committee by the prison in order to constitute a common front. And we demand to know how the Bordeaux Prisoners Fund is used. Where does the money from this fund go? So those are some of the demands on the noprisons.ca website. And like I said, the strike's been going on since the 5th. And we have heard of a bunch of, like as Elle mentioned before, the Laval hunger strike in the Immigration Detention Center resulted in the release of a lot of folks. So I think, as I said before, it's important to amplify the demands by folks inside, because it has led to releases for folks.
Sheena, we've heard reports about people inside of jails and prisons actually making masks for people on the outside to wear, while you're reporting to us that people are demanding masks for themselves because they don't have any. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so Bordeaux is the provincial joint, and like as you've just heard in the demands, they don't have access to adequate PPE. We have heard reports that in the Women's Federal Joint, Joliette, which is affiliated with Corcan, which is sort of this manufacturing for-profit arm of CSC, they've been making masks to be used by folks inside and also folks outside. It's a little unclear. So yeah, the sort of horror of that and how we value certain lives and don't value others is very, very clear in this moment. as sort of who has access to care and who does not have access to care in this context.
Well, we really appreciate you bringing us those voices from inside. It's always hard to get voices of people who are incarcerated, but that's who we really need to hear from today. So thank you, Sheena, for that.
Totally, thank you.
Well, coming to the end of our time together, you can see that I believe we've lost some power on the streams. I think batteries died as people were energetically moving from place to place. So we are going to start wrapping up. Everybody who's still on this Zoom, I don't know if Martha, if you're still here, so we thought we might go back across country and everyone just give us a quick closing statement or closing word. So Martha, are you still here?
I am.
Good, so we're gonna kick us off. So just any last words?
Well, we've had so much success working together in Nova Scotia to decarcerate at the provincial level. We know this is possible. This is simply a matter of commitment and compassion and common sense from the federal system. And so the time is now. And you know, as of yesterday, there were 14 women incarcerated in all of Nova Scotia in the provincial system. And that's the lowest it's ever been in our working time since 2014. And while we hope to get it even lower, that's really extraordinary. And we can see that type of reduction in the federal system with commitment to release with supports.
Thank you, Martha. And Martha is also a practicing nurse and a PhD student in nursing. And I'm going to big her up. She's also a Trudeau scholar, but maybe in this context, we don't want to big up. How about Sheena, any last words? Oh, sorry, we don't have sound.
I'm here.
Good.
Unfortunately, Quebec, we haven't seen the same release either federally or provincially. I would encourage people to listen to the prison radio show tonight on CKUT. It'll also be online. Prison radio show also has a Twitter, or the anti-carceral group Facebook. We'll link it there as well, just to get more updates on what's happening in Quebec and sort of pushes for release here. Because so far it just really hasn't happened. And also amplifying voices from the inside, hopefully tonight on Prison Radio Show. So I'd encourage people to check that out.
Thank you very much, Sheena. Cyrus, you're still with us in Toronto. What are your closing thoughts today?
Yeah, I would just say that now is not a time for reform. Now is a time for abolition. And I think if we're working towards something, we should be working towards the dismantling of this entire system. Like, this is a revolutionary moment. We are in a revolutionary time right now. And I know revolution is not a one-time event, it's an ongoing process, but we are in a revolutionary moment and we should be pushing for the absolute possible best case scenario, which would be bringing all of our loved ones home immediately. And I think that that's what we should be fighting for, because as Angela Davis says, you know, we have to work as if we're going to win. And if we fall a little bit short of that, we'll at least be so much further ahead than if we just set our sights really, really close to what we could achieve. So abolition now. There is going to be a vigil tomorrow night around all of the Black Death that we're seeing, both in society, but also as a result of COVID-19. It's an online vigil that's happening tomorrow night, organized by Black Lives Matter at 9:15. People can tune in and just be together.
Thank you, Cyrus. And Meenakshi.
The organizer's always telling us what's next. He's always having the next thing to tell us about. Of course, syrusmarcusware, Vanier scholar, visual artist, community activist, researcher, youth advocate, and educator. Pleasure to have you with us. Meenakshi, are you still with us in Vancouver?
I am. I think my closing message would just be free them all for public health and free them all because prisons don't work. We'll be heading back out to Mission Institution for a noise demo this Sunday. And if people want to follow our work at the Prison Justice Day Committee, they can find us on Facebook at Vancouver Prison Justice Groups. In solidarity with the folks doing the actions today, and also with prisoners in Bordeaux who are currently striking.
Thank you. And Desmond, I'm going to ask you to give us some closing thoughts, and then we're going to go to some thoughts from prisoners, so messages that were recorded from the inside. So take it away, Desmond, and then we'll be hearing from prisoners to close us out.
Well, we want to hear from your closing thoughts as well, Elle, too, because you've been doing this work for such a long time. The only thing I can add really to what's been said so far is to reiterate the fact that prison is never a safe or acceptable place for people to be. and that I really hope that we try to consolidate and solidify the incredible changes that we're seeing. We don't allow them to be one-time events, that we continue pushing like this, as difficult as it is, and as much time and energy as it takes. I don't believe in the notion that, you know, we let crisis happen so that we can try to get something out of it, that it'll magically accelerate us to a better place. This is horrible and it's catastrophic. People are sick, people are dying, and we're only making the best of the situation as we can, but we're doing what's necessary to, for example, get people who were incarcerated out of prison. We can build on that, and I believe we must. Go ahead with your closing now, and then we'll hear from folks on
And
the
I'm going
show.
to say that Desmond Cole's book, The Skin We're In, is available. It was is a number one bestseller in Canada, dealing with policing and state violence. So if you haven't already picked it up, you can read it, or you can get an audio book if you want something to do during the pandemic. So please do pick up Desmond's book, which deals with a lot of the underlying issues that we are speaking about today. I'm not going to keep us much longer. I want to get to the voice of the prisoners. I'm very grateful to everybody that was on this stream today, giving us knowledge from across this country. And of course, what that shows us is that prison touches our lives, all the time. The reach of the prison is so broad across this country. So prisons are both hidden and we never hear about them, but also have their tentacles everywhere. People are criminalized daily. So we know during this pandemic, we know that policing has largely criminalized Black kids playing basketball in their own neighborhoods, and people who don't have homes that are being given tickets for being in tents, and youth who are given tickets for not social distancing because they're homeless on the streets, right? So we know at this time we've seen this intensification of what is always here, which is the intensification of oppression towards racialized people, queer people, trans people, people without housing, people living in poverty. So if we take one thing away from today, seeing across this country, is that we have to continue to fight these institutions on these lands that continually commit violence upon people who are colonized, people who are racialized, and people who are so-called vulnerable. But they are not vulnerable because of themselves. They are made vulnerable to violence of this system that continually discards certain people while upholding people like Bill Blair, who are criminals and who have committed criminal acts, who have violated people's human rights, and continue to be given the power to do so, while people who have done nothing but move their body from one place to another, or have an illness, or live in poverty, continue to be institutionalized. So we continue to call for abolition, and not just at this time, for all time. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you to all of our guests. Thank you, Desmond.
Thank you, Ella. Before we let everybody go, I've got to make sure that I say that lots of people know that Elle is one of the most tireless prison advocates in this country. She's a former poet laureate, the recipient of the Rocky Jones Award for her work doing prison justice. Elle, you are a lifeline to so many people. You're not just talking about this work, you're doing it every day, and we're so lucky to have you.
Thank you, Desmond. Do we have the sounds ready to go? We're just waiting to hear.
Yes, we're planning to leave you.
Well, yeah, hello, Bill. Well, I currently serving time in the minimum, well, they call it minimum, but it's really medium CFS level. And what I would like to say is, inaction at this moment is basically giving everyone in here a life sentence, let alone a death sentence, because you're killing them. Inaction is, might as well go back and give people a death sentence. Also, no cleaning supplies, no adequate equipment. You might as well have people have their own responsibility of living and surviving. Just give them the chance. You're not giving them any chance. We're up to 90 cases. In less than 2 weeks, we were up to 90 cases, man. That's an outbreak. Anywhere in the community, you would see more people come in to help, but there's less people. All you have is guards, and they're going from one station to the other, spreading it. We were enclosed. Nobody brought it in. We could not have brought it in, but they came in with it, and they're running around everywhere to every unit every time. So how are we really stopping anything? The only logical is help a person who's out the door soon, is get him out faster so he can have a better chance of living and making it. 60% of the population here, at least minimum 60%, is over the 60 or 50, over 55 years old. Are you kidding me? Come on. Wake up. Don't kill Bill. Save us.
Okay. Being incarcerated does not change the fact that COVID-19 affects certain individuals disproportionately. It's quite the contrary. Social distancing while incarcerated is damn near impossible. To social distance within a prison environment, everyone incarcerated must be segregated, which is just not a feasible option. Releasing them in prison to assist their families and restore their communities sounds like a much more viable option. Freedom needs to be a must, not just during these times, not just during a pandemic, not only in a crisis situation. Take it from me, I'm incarcerated in a medium security federal institution, and these are my thoughts.
Thank you, everybody.
Prison is a death sentence. Noprisons.ca is the website for the Abolition Coalition. I'm Desmond Cole, signing off with immense gratitude.
Thank you, everybody. I'm Elle Jones. It was an honor to be here with everybody today. Thank you so much for the work, and to everybody on the ground, and particularly to the prisoners who left us with their thoughts in the most heartbreaking, and I hope we carry those thoughts away with us. So thank you, everybody, and take care, be safe, and free them all.